Try again.
All right, I'm now using the microphone on the. I'm gonna hold on 1 second. All right, now can you hear me online? All right, we can hear me online now. All right, now can you hear me online? All right, we can hear me online. All right. All right, I think we are finally ready to start. My apologies to everyone. We do have an echo. Is the echo still there, Gail? Complete with lagging echo. Mic off. All right, is the echo gone now online? Okay. All right, we had an internet problem here, and it seems like even when we have everything together, something seems to fall apart, but we are here, and thank you all for coming out for tonight. How many are here for the first time? Just a handful? Oh, all right, about a third of you. We do this pretty much every month when I am in town, and I try to shake it up a little bit. It used to be that once a month, my dearly departed astrology buddy Jeff Jower and I did this once a month when Soul Food first opened. I think it was about 15 years ago. Anyone know how long Soul Food's been here? Been about 15 years. 17. So we started about 15 or 16 years ago. And it used to be that this was a day by day, blow by blow, what's happening for the month ahead. But then when I began traveling a little more, Jeff passed now nearly 10 years ago. And it's kind of crazy. I mean, it's like a blink of an eye. That was in 2015. And then when COVID happened, it was like there was no gathering here, so I began doing them, the monthlies from my office at home or wherever I was. And then when we started doing it from here again, I didn't want to duplicate what I've already been doing online, so I tried to, in the evenings here, not do a day by day for the month ahead, which you can get on my YouTube channel, and there's no real reason to be redundant. Craig, can you make sure that that camera is centered on me? I feel like I'm off. Yeah, and maybe zoom in a little more or something. Just it doesn't seem like it's very centered. Actually, Craig, that camera is not being used. So this camera, hang on everyone. Let's see what happens. that means we have to put this back. All right, hold on again. Do we have sound again? Okay, sound is back. All right, let's try this again. Welcome to Astrology Night at SoulFood Coffeehouse in Redmond, Washington. I'm your host this evening, and I'm going to try to stay a bit sane for the length of what we have here tonight. No guarantees before or after. I do want to talk a bit tonight about the larger scenario of what's going on. And sometimes I feel like I'm a bit of a repeating record, that hits that place where it just keeps doing the same damn thing over and over again. But I think there's important things going on. And for those of you who saw my October forecast, you know that the title for October was Hidden Agenda. And we struggled over the title because there's something going on right now that doesn't appear to be going on. And this is not to minimize the craziness of the earth-wide shit show that is happening. And this is pretty much politics, not agnostic, what's the word? Not ambivalent, but it doesn't matter what your politics are. It's a crazy world out there. And there is incredible bifurcation of extreme energies that pulls. It reminds me of, I think it's hexagram 28, for those of you who are each. And the hexagram says, the ridgepole sags to the breaking point. It furthers the great man to have somewhere to go. And, the ridgepole is what held the bridge up. And it's like the bridges now are reaching a point where it's going to break. Something's going to break. We all talk about the possibilities of what's around the corner with a great deal of either frustration or disillusionment or discouragement of what's happening now. And yet many people hold hopes for we are at a point where there is great change. And I do believe that. I'm neither an optimist nor a pessimist, but I am a possibilist. I do see what's possible, and I look at the astrology of what's going on these days, these months, these years, and I try to keep a sensible awareness over what I see in the chart or the charts versus what I see in my mind and what I would like to see. And so, I admit very readily that I have a perspective, I have a point of view, I know the world in which I would like to live, and I know that we are not living in that world right now. I have been an astrologer who kind of often is a bit of a transit minimalist. Transits are what happens when the planets keep moving around. They're the things that change the seasons and change the weather and change the social and economic and political environments in which we live. And there's a part of me that always thinks that when things are great, they're not quite as good as all the people who are saying they're great. And when things really suck, they're not quite as bad as they could be. In other words, I'm the person who's always pulling towards the middle, even though I might have extreme opinions. And I say that because as an astrologer, I read a lot of what other astrologers post on the internet, and it makes me a bit crazy that every month I see astrologers saying, the new moon this month is the most important new moon that ever happened. and that and that every event, whether it's a new moon, a full moon, an eclipse, a planet changing signs, a conjunction of whatever the planets are, it always seems like this hasn't happened in a million years. This hasn't happened in a million years. Okay, I don't know about the million, but I do know that there is a confluence of rivers that are coming together at this moment in time that make this moment in time more unique than any other moment in time that I have seen, looking back as far as we are able to look through our historical lens and through using the tools that we have. And there's a few different things, and for those of you who have either heard me talk before or listened to my stuff online, or even listened to other astrologers, because most astrologers are talking in some way about these same things, although I have to admit that many astrologers particularize and focus on whatever the event is in the month ahead. Last month was the end of the world because there were eclipses. This month it's Neptune retrograding back into Pisces. This is it. Well, Jeff Jower, my now deceased astrology partner in crime, used to call this the Astrologers' Full Employment Act. And he used to say, and people say, well, what the hell is that? He goes, the planets, they keep moving around. They're going to keep moving around with us or without us, before us and after us. And having said that, though, there are a few things that are happening that are coming to an intersection point that really began back in the 60s, and then came to another round of intensity in the late 80s, early 90s, and then another round of intersection intensity in around in the 2010s, but 2012 through 2015, when a lot of the issues of the mid-60s were back on us again, whether it was gender realignment, whether it was the feminist movement in the mid-60s and the legalization of and recognition of gender fluidity and or gay marriage legalization, so on. In the 60s, it was the use of mind-altering substances, and then in the 2012 through 2013, the legalization first of medical and then recreational use of many of these substances. The political realignments, the civil rights of the 60s compared to those issues in the 2012 to 2015, people on the streets in the 1960s, and then again in the 2012 to 2015, we had the Arab Spring and the Occupy Wall Street. And there was just a buzz of energy, and I'm just touching the surface. But these two periods of time, also tied to with what was going on with boundary realignments in the late 80s, early 90s, have fed into a period of time in which we now stand, but we're myopic in looking at time. We think of time as like right now. And yet from a cosmic astrological perspective, right now is like the last 50, 70, 100 years, even 300 or 500 years, because from a cosmic perspective, this moment is just a blip. We look back and we see periods, back historically, and we reduce them to single events without realizing they were generationally long transitions. We are in such a transition, but for the first time, there are a number of things at play aside from the astrology. And I want to talk about the astrology and then the things that are at play that make the astrology different than it's ever been before. The major things at play are the fact that the outer planets meaning Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in particular, are all forming a set of interactions that make them geometrically harmonizing with each other. And in astrology, many of you know the term transits. And a transit is when a planet that's moving in the sky makes an angle with a planet in your birth or natal chart. And these angles are, if they're lined up, they're called a conjunction. If they're exactly opposite, like a full moon is opposite the sun, it's called an opposition. And when they're 90 degrees to each other, it's called a square. These are all harsh energies geometrically because there is conflict or tension or stress. But when you have planets that are like an equilateral triangle, and a triangle is the singularly most and maybe only fully stable geometric form. If you have something that's triangulated, it has stability. So we are at a point where Uranus, the planet that's associated with radical change, the planet that's associated with Prometheus stealing technology like fire from the gods and using it to move humanity into a more godlike perspective of the universe. Uranus, the planet of shock, surprise, awe, revolution, technology, the future. Uranus in the sky right now has just changed signs, as it does every 7 years. And so that when a planet changes signs every 7 years, it's like perhaps it's never happened before in our individual lives that we were alive when when Uranus moved from Taurus, a sign of stability, into Gemini, a sign of adaptability. And that's what's going on right now with the planet Uranus. But Uranus changes signs every 7 years. That's not the unusual, powerful thing. What's unusual or powerful is that it only moves from Taurus into Gemini once every 84 years. But even that doesn't make it so special that it becomes a special event unto itself. The thing about Uranus's move from Taurus into Gemini is that it's doing it at the same time that Pluto, which is a 248-year, I think 250 years is close enough, 250-year cycle, when Pluto is moving from from Capricorn into Aquarius. Now, Aquarius and Gemini are air signs, and when the elements are connected in astrology, that's a trine. That makes the equilateral triangle. And so we have Uranus forming a trine with Pluto, and a trine geometrically says that there's a flow of energy. What does this mean? It means that the radical change of Uranus, the lightning striking, releasing built up tension, is doing it in a way that is harmoniously feeding into Pluto. Now, Pluto is Latin for Hades, which is Greek for hell. All right, from a Christian perspective, this ain't such a good deal. But this is really what we got to talk about tonight. And I know I've touched on this topic before, previously, but the concept here is that in the Judeo-Christian tradition, Christianity in particular, hell is not a pretty place. It's a place where you go for eternity to be punished for the sins of having been here on earth. We are all in this scenario born of original sin, and therefore we all have to pay the price. In all the other indigenous cultures around the world, hell is a place that's not here, not now, but it's not only bad, because in the other indigenous cultures, hell actually contains heaven. And hell is a place where these intermediate states between physicality, the Tibetans call these the Bardo states. It's the states of non-physical being. And we in the West look at death as the end. Pluto is called the Lord of Death in traditional astrology because death was considered to be the end of the road. We moderners now know that that is not the case. And this is part of what I want to talk about that makes these changes this time very different, because we are being pushed into awarenesses that contain the acceptability and, now I want to say belief, but it's not a belief, the knowledge that consciousness doesn't have to rely on being physical. And I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes, because this is really an important underlying theme of what's going on these days. So we have Pluto, which is about death, but in the larger mythology, death cannot occur without rebirth, because everything is cyclical. And I like to use the metaphor, many astrologers use this metaphor of a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, because the caterpillar's got to go in order for the butterfly to be born. And it's not about the death of the caterpillar. It's about the transformation of a caterpillar into a higher order of physical structure. And yet in between caterpillarness and butterflyness, there's something that happens. And that something that happens is an in-between state. It's an intermediate state where there is no caterpillar. It's just black, brown, gunky, oozy something. The caterpillar has dissolved. And whatever that is alive but without form begins to spark and send signals and then recreate in a geometry that then is rebirthed as a butterfly. I am suggesting that we as a species of humanity are basically in that black gunky state. And there's a lot of us humans that are absolutely fearful of being a butterfly. And there are a lot of us that are absolutely fearful and filled with shame and guilt that we were ever a physical human. But we don't have a say in this larger process. It's going to occur. It is occurring with or without our permission. So Pluto, as the planet of transformation, of death and rebirth, and I know many of you have heard me say this before, but William Blake, the English mystic poet, who is a champion of writing a mythology around some of these concepts, not an astrologer at all, by the way, but he wanted on his grave, he wanted William Blake, born 1757, died many times since. That's the Pluto that we are talking about. Now, Pluto and Uranus were lined up from Earth's point of view in the mid-1960s, as they do every century or so. It's an irregular cycle. But when they line up, it's always something of great power. When they lined up in 1455, that was the year that Gutenberg printed the Bible on. It was the first mass-produced item. It was the printing press that produced the Bible. And Gutenberg thought that the Bible would be the only thing that would ever be worth printing. Interestingly enough, when Uranus and Pluto lined up in 1965, IBM came out with its first business computer that was a self-contained package, the System 36. And they thought that printing, digitally printing, big business and government was the only thing that the computer would ever be used for. And of course, Gutenberg didn't realize that it would be an astrologer, Marsilio Ficino, in the 1470s, 80s, who translated Plato from Greek into Latin, and then translated the Corpus Hermetica, the hidden works that came allegedly from the since fallen ancient dynasties of Egypt. That these two pieces that were published, mass-produced on the printing press, basically created what we now call the Protestant Reformation, because there was a whole new kind of way of looking at the world. Well, we look back to the mid-1960s and the IBM's creation of the digital printing press, the IBM computer, and then we realize that over the ensuing years, just like the printing press printed material that brought about the downfall of the church, that at the end of the 1980s into the early 90s, we had the personal computer revolution, which doesn't seem much like a revolution these days because so many of us or you have never known a world without the internet, without computers on every desk or table or in your pocket in the form disguised as a phone. So these two events, as just examples, have changed the nature of the world that we live in. And they both occurred at a time when Uranus, the planet of upheaval from revolution and shock and technology, contacted Pluto, the planet of all the hidden, suppressed underworld stuff that has to do with power and control. Incidentally, the word plutocracy, we hear a lot about the word oligarchy, the government that is run by the wealthy. Well, a plutocracy is basically an oligarchy on steroids, meaning that a plutocracy is a government that is not run by the wealthy people who can see their wealth, the Jeff Bezos and the Elon Musks and the Larry Ellisons and the Bill Gates and whomever. A plutocracy suggests that someone is running the show because Pluto, as the lord of the underworld, is unknown, it's hidden. It's the unconscious, it's that which we do not know. And it's the secrets that basically create the power of a What we are experiencing right now, for the first time since the early 1920s, is a dance between Uranus, the planet of shock, surprise, awe, revolution, upheaval, and Pluto, the transmutation of caterpillar into butterfly. What was happening in the early 20s? Well, before the shit hit the fan, toward the end of the 20s, with a Great Depression in the United States and the rise of fascism in the form that we've not quite seen, in that form of Nazi Germany and World War II. Prior to that, the 20s got off to an amazing start. It was the roaring 20s. Everyone was having fun. It was like an amazing period of time. There were new things. Radio had just become like widely available, and the buzz and the hum was really exciting. Well, this is where we're at the edge of with this Uranus-Pluto trine, which is just tickling into place now. These outer planets move so gradually, and because the Earth is going around inside the planets look like they go forward and then backward. They don't really. That's retrograde motion. Forward and backward as the Earth basically, makes it look like they're moving forward and backward. And what this means is that as these slow-moving outer planets change signs, they don't do it on one day. They do it, and then they back up into the previous sign, and then they go forward again, and then they may go backward again and still touch that same ground 3 or even 5 times. And what that means is this Uranus-Pluto trine, which theoretically means a flow of energy between the change and technology and moving into the new, and Pluto, that which had been hidden and kept under wraps, made invisible, unconscious. That means that this trine will be exact 5 times over the next several years. The first of the 5 times that it will be exact, I mean like 0 degrees, 00 minutes, exactly 120 degrees, that's 1/3 of a circle. If you think of an equilateral triangle, there's 2 points on the, two points on the triangle, 2 vertices. That will be exact for the first of 5 times next July. I think the date is July 17th or 18th, right in there, give or take a couple of days. But right now, they're within 1/4 of a degree of being exact before the retrogrades kick in and then widen that, and then it'll come back next year. We're at a point where we're getting a flavor, a taste of what could happen, of what's around the bend. But it's kind of, I hate to go biblical on you, it's like Moses not being allowed into the promised land, or the wandering Jews until all the old world, the people who had known slavery died off. And in a way, there's a part of this slow-moving transit that is not letting us just run into this new whatever it is that's around the corner. And I have to say, if it sounds like I know what's around the corner, let me be clear. I don't, and neither do you. And neither does anyone else who says that they do, because it's still in flux. And that's my underlying foundational point that I want to make tonight. But here's the thing. We're getting a flavor and a taste of that. And just that Uranus-Pluto trine, as both Uranus and Pluto are changing signs. Again, Uranus moved into Gemini around the time that the United States was formed. It's an 84-year cycle. It moved into Gemini again at the beginning of the Civil War. It moved into Uranus again at the beginning of World War II. And it moved into Uranus again over these past months, and will be in Uranus, and then it'll be in Gemini, then it'll back up into Taurus a little bit, and then it'll move into Gemini, where it'll be for the next 7 years, but it'll do that next spring. So we're at this transition point of Uranus. Meanwhile, Pluto, having just moved into Aquarius, and we'll look at this graphically in a few minutes, because to see it will help you understand, how this works. But Pluto, which is a 248-year cycle, can anybody do math? What was 248 years ago? Yeah. I mean, 1776, the Declaration of Independence, plus 248 years is 2024. So just like every year, astrologically or non-astrologically, everyone becomes an astrologer, because astrologers celebrate or note the return of any planet to where it was in its previous cycle. So every year when the sun returns to where it was when we were born, even though we say we don't believe in astrology, we all celebrate the fact that the sun is at the exact same spot where it was when we were born from Earth's point of view. For those of you who have delved into astrology, you know that at age 29, 30, that we all experience Saturn's first return to where it was when we were born. We experience it again a second time around age 57, 58. And for those of us old enough, we can look back to when we were 28, 29, 30 and go, oh yeah, that was when I got married, got divorced, bought a home, sold a home, changed jobs, changed careers, had kids, didn't have kids, went back to school, killed my parent. But it's big stuff that sets in motion things for our lifetime. And so when a planet returns to where it was on a previous cycle, that's like a re-imprinting of its energy. Well, the United States of America is celebrating its first Pluto birthday. We celebrate its birthday every year on July 4th by celebrating the sun. We light candles and make it look like we're setting off toy bombs. Don't get me started. But a Pluto return is not about celebration. It's about death and rebirth. It's about the process of plutonic going into the underworld and becoming that mush between caterpillar and butterfly. So that's happening as Pluto in March of 2023 touched into Aquarius for the first time in 240s, well, actually in about 220 some odd years, because it was just at the very beginning. It actually Pluto stays in the sign for anywhere between 15 and 30 years because it's such an uneven elliptical orbit. So as Pluto is going from Capricorn to Aquarius and back to Capricorn and back to Aquarius and back to Capricorn again, and now it's in Aquarius, it's only in the first degree or at 1 degree of Aquarius, while Uranus in its first time in 84 years is moving into Gemini. This is different than every other time we've experienced Uranus moving from Taurus into Gemini, because the other times it wasn't harmonizing with the Lord of Death and Transformation. Are you with me? Yeah. So this makes this something that is, even though I'm loath to say it, it's never happened before in this way, at least in modern history. That would be enough to stop there. But that's just the tip of the tongue first taste. Because at the same time, we have a totally separate event occurring. It's not separate, you'll see in a moment. But many astrologers are treating it as a separate event. And that is Saturn, which is a 29 and a half year, let's call it 30 years just to round it off. But think of Saturn as a 30-year cycle. And in fact, Saturn, if you're under 30, you don't trust anyone over 30 because they're grown up. If you're over 30, it doesn't matter how cool someone is in their 20s, they're still a kid. It's not about, 18 or 21. There's something about that, late 20s to early 30s gate that has to do with Saturn, which is the planet of responsibility. Saturn is the planet of maturity. Saturn's the taskmaster. Saturn represents the limits. And in a way, until we developed technology, we couldn't see anything move past Saturn. Saturn was the outward circumference of our circle of life. You went out past Saturn, it was just the fixed stars. They didn't appear to move at all. Saturn is the boundary between metaphysical and physical. If you're inside the orbit of Saturn, that has to do with the fallen realms, the human realms. You think of Lucifer as a fallen angel. Angels have no physicality. But when they fall through the gates of Saturn, and this goes back to a Greek, perhaps Egyptian concept also, but certainly a Greek concept, that Saturn is the gate between here and there. And in fact, the word Satan and Saturn come from Satan, El Satan, from the Aramaic and Hebrew. And Satan basically represents that which was godlike that fell through the gates of Saturn and becomes manifest in the three-dimensional world. Why is this significant? Well, Saturn's 30-year cycle, as it goes around every 30 years, it will line up with the other slower moving planets. And in fact, it lines up with Pluto, the Lord of Death and Transformation. It lines up with Pluto roughly every 35 years, but it can be 32 to 38 years because, again, Pluto's orbit's very irregular. And in fact, when you look at Saturn and Pluto's alignments, whether they're lined up on the same side of Earth or opposite with Earth in the middle, like a new moon and a full moon, you get little events like they lined up opposite sides of Earth in the fall of 2001. Anyone think of anything in the fall of 2001? 9/11, the World Trade Tower bombing. They lined up in August of 2014. You got any historians here? August of 2014 was when Duke Ferdinand was assassinated. That started the domino pile up of World War I. In fact, they lined up by opposition in 1898 when the World Zionist Organization was founded, and when Africa was carved up into colonial named countries in a meeting in Berlin of Western European powers. But they lined up, again on key dates that go all the way back to the Islamic conquering of Spain, and then 700 years later of them getting basically pushed back out of Spain. The key dates of this Saturn and Pluto thing, which I have a YouTube video on that you can find online, is crazy. I mean, it's just like, I call it Walt's time for civilization, because Saturn and Pluto line up 3 times a century. So it's almost like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3, and if you count the conjunctions and oppositions. So Saturn lines up with all of these outer planets, and when it does, it gives structure to whatever the outer planet is. And in the case of Pluto, it's death and rebirth. It's redrawing of boundaries. It's new ideologies. All these things that have to do with Saturn and construction of what appears to be real. On February 20th next year, October, November, December, January, February, 4 months down the road, Saturn will line up with the planet Neptune, as it does about every 36 years. There's a lot of stuff online that you can find about the history of Saturn-Pluto conjunctions. I don't want to go back, I want to go forward, but I do want to say that although Saturn and Pluto line up every 36 years, let me stop for a moment there and just say what that's about, because Neptune, also outside of Saturn, Neptune is the planet that's associated with dreams and illusions. And when Neptune was discovered in the 1800s, it was thought to be the worst thing ever, because it had to do with psychosis and with delusions and with mental problems and with deceit. It was all these things that were not what was true. And then as we began to integrate those energies, we began to realize, wait a minute, Neptune is also our dreams. It's illusions, but in the Freudian sense, an illusion is anything based on a wish fulfillment. Disney's A Dream is a Wish Your Heart Makes. You have an illusion, and then Saturn, the hard work, the taskmaster, the make it real, the discipline, makes our dreams come true. Or we're crazy, because Neptune is either or maybe both and. But Neptune is about illusion, it's about dreams, it's about fantasy, it's about our imagination. I have an astrologer friend, Caroline Casey, who always says, like one of her repeating lines, it's a great line, the imagination lays the tracks for the reality train to follow. I like to say that Neptune creates the scaffolding or the framework upon which we use Saturn to build what appears real. And I'm saying appears real because herein lies the problem. There's an astrologer, Rob Hand. Anyone who studied astrology knows Rob's work. I call him the academic dean of astrology on planet Earth. He's a smart boy. And Rob wrote many years ago, we as astrologers learned that Saturn is reality and Neptune is illusion. That's how most students of astrology learn astrology. He said, but now we've come to realize that Neptune is reality and Saturn is the illusion there was one. So here we are with Saturn and Neptune coming together, the planet of crystallization of things that are contracted and appear three-dimensional, Saturn, what we would call the real world. And Neptune, anything we can make up in our mind, we don't have to justify it. It's neither good or bad. We can imagine any kind of party and Dad's not going to punish us because it's in our mind. You know, Neptune is basically the freedom from any of those rules. So we are coming into, next February, an exact alignment of Saturn and Neptune. It happens every 36 years. But there's a special point in astrology that's the beginning of the cycle. You know, cycles go round and round and round. There really is there's no beginning, no end. But astrologers use a system that is based upon the beginning of every cycle that occurs at the vernal equinox, the spring equinox in the northern hemisphere. We call that Aries, because the 12 signs are just mathematical. Aries is the 0 point, and Taurus is 30 degrees, and Gemini is 60, and each of the signs represents 30 degrees around until you get to Pisces, which is the end, and then the beginning happens again at Aries. This is the way the cycle works. This point of 0 degrees of Aries is so significant that there are schools of astrology that use what they call the Aries point, just as if it was a real planet. I heard one of you guys was talking about Uranian astrology or cosmobiology, and that's where this is brought into use. This Saturn-Neptune conjunction will occur at 0 degrees of Aries. And all of us who have computers have looked back and seen when was the last time that Saturn and Neptune aligned on this incredibly potent point that's the beginning of every cycle. And the answer is never, at least within the last 5,000 or 6,000 years. That in itself would be a huge thing. But here's where it gets interesting, because as Saturn and Pluto are aligning at 0 degrees of Aries, that's halfway between the Uranus and Pluto trine at 0 or 1 degrees of Aquarius and Gemini. And again, I'll put the graphic up on this in just a moment. But we have an extraordinary moment that doesn't seem to have ever happened before. And in ancient astrology, trines, 120-degree geometric angle, 2 points on an equilateral triangle, trines, and half of those points, which are called sextiles. And if you think of a grand trine, it's like a full equilateral triangle. If you think of a grand sextile, it's a Solomon seal or a Star of David, or the flower of life. There's something about that 6-pointed star that has to do with the self-repetition of its own energy. There's this flow. And so what we have occurring is the outer planets of Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto basically forming on 3 adjacent points of a 6-pointed star. And there's other geometry that will come in that will fill in other of those points. So the geometry here is extraordinary. Now I want to step back a moment, because at the beginning I said that there's some extraordinary astrology things happening, and there are more than what I just described, but I want to keep it there just so that we don't get confused or what's the word, overflood, overwhelmed. Do you know that whelmed is a word? No, this is true. Whelmed means to be underwater. What the hell does underwhelmed or overwhelmed mean then? Because the word whelmed means to be underwater. Don't ask, don't tell. Okay, so I want to say a few more words about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, because it has to do with that idea of Saturn being reality and Neptune being imagination. And yet, in the past couple of centuries, really, but more since the mid-60s, and really even more in the past 5-10 years, our concept of what is real has changed. Has anyone here ever been on a Zoom meeting? Wait, let me do this. Has anyone here ever not been on a Zoom meeting? I mean, we've all sat at our computer, and then someone gets online who's the moderator and says, okay, are we all here? Where the fuck is here? I mean, for thousands of years, here meant, are we all here? It would mean at SoulFood Coffeehouse in this moment in time. If someone is still in Seattle, they're not here. But now, are we all here? Yeah, where are you? I'm in Berlin. You know, I'm in Anchorage. Where are you? I'm in Bolivia. Where are you? I'm in Perth. Well, okay, we're all here. Let's do it. Where is here? And to make things even more confusing, when is now? I'm here. I just woke up. I had a good night's sleep. I'm here. It's 2 a.m. and I'm staying awake for this meeting. What is real? Saturn has lost its command of being the sense of finality in reality. It used to be that Saturn was the period at the last sentence at the end of the book. You reach that point, you're dead. Heaven or hell depends on, you know, how the feather is, you know, weighed against your weight of your heart. It's whether or not you've sinned, whatever it is. And it's eternity. Boom, that moment, it's done. We now have a pretty different view. And for those of you who don't have that different view, it's not because it doesn't exist. It's just because you don't know about it yet. We've, in this day and age, more people than ever have had experiences, know people who have had experiences, or have read enough to know that something isn't quite right about this idea that when we die, that's it, it's over. You know, I have a friend who always used to say, and we probably all have friends like this, but this person used to say, no, I'm good, let's go sleep. Nah, you can sleep when you die. Apparently not. So with technology and with feedback of these what might be called paranormal or psychedelic, and I don't mean drug-induced, although they certainly can be. The word psychedelic means psyche, mind, delia, to expand. It's just moving beyond the normal states of consciousness, that there are things that we didn't bargain on or were not part of our history unless you were a mystic or unless you had a connection with someone who was a mystic. In a way, we've all become mystics of sorts because of these experiences. When Saturn lines up with Uranus, the textbook version of this would be, we don't know what's real, because Saturn, the planet of reality, is bringing things that were imaginal or non-physical into reality. Where did they come from? And or Neptune, the planet of dreams and imagination and delusion, is taking those things that we thought were real and fuzzing them out so that they don't necessarily seem real. It's a two-way street. It's that place between what's here and now and three-dimensional and inside of Saturn, the material world, and what's outside of Saturn, the non-material or metaphysical world. And I like to respect a quote that from Deepak Chopra. It's one of those quotes that I wish I thought of, but I didn't. He got it. And what Deepak Chopra said is, modern science suffers from its belief in the medieval superstition of materialism. Modern science suffers from its belief in the medieval superstition of materialism. I mean, we talk about the mind-body interface. We talk about mind over matter. You know, when J.B. Rhine was doing experiments with telepathy or clairvoyance, at Duke University in the 1950s and early 60s, this was extraordinary stuff. Now it's like, yeah, so it's like we've all had these experiences. And to bring it back to this moment in time, this month in October, in September and October, Saturn and Neptune are coming within a quarter of a degree of being exact before they retrograde, and that widens, and then they will be exact at 0 degrees of Aries next February. So you see, we have these two separate things, the Uranus-Pluto trine, which is the implications of social revolution and transformation and death and rebirth of an entire process, a government, the fundamental underpinnings even, of not just the United States government, but these changes are happening all over the world right now. And at the same time, the breakdown of what we thought was a hard, fast line between fact and fiction. I remember, growing up, I was a bit of a library geek, and I loved the idea that everything was either fact or fiction. If it was fact, it was Dewey Decimal classifications, and you knew exactly where to find your travel books and your biography, but it was fact or fiction. And now I would say that most of us live in a world where most of our input is hard to tell. It's fact and fiction. Saturn and Neptune. You see where I'm going with all this? And I find it particularly intriguing that during this same moment in time, we have such a massive movement going on in the federal government, at least in this country, but apparently elsewhere also, about what is often referred to as disclosure. Now, disclosure is a great Pluto word because it indicates that there are things that are hidden, that are buried, that are unconscious, that are not on the surface. The hell realms are not here, not now. They're stuffed away somewhere. And disclosure refers particularly to the disclosure of government suppression of information about what we once called UFOs. We then changed it to UAPs, but it really is about what I think the larger scenario is, and that's ET. And I want to say more about ET in just a moment because it's so relevant to what's happening right now. Before I do, though, I want to just mention that I find it fascinating not only that this has become such a big thing over the past few years to the point where the amount of information and intelligence and real research and documentation over things that 10 or 20 or 30, 40 years ago, if you said, someone would look at you thinking you're crazy, and now they go, yeah, and what about, and they had something else. There's just so much information here. But here's the thing, is right now, and I don't know how many of you, I think I mentioned this in the email that some of you probably got, what's going on right now with the Comet 3I Atlas. And again, I'm going to say anyone who says they know, and I know a lot of people who say they know, don't. They don't know. We don't know. But we do know that this has taken over the consciousness of the traditional conservative, even, I say conservative not politically, but just metaphysically conservative media, that everyone has their antenna up as what the hell is this thing? It definitely is not from within our solar system we've ever seen before. It's definitely the size and the mass of it don't fit the energy that it's giving off. It's changed its shape. It's popped out, I think 7 or other bodies now around it that have come from nowhere. It's on a trajectory that is nearly impossible because it's coming in at an angle that's on the ecliptic, the plane of the, of our solar system, in a way that will graze 3 planets as if it was on a reconnaissance mission. And Earth is not one of them, but Jupiter, Mars, and Venus are all, in its path. And there are many people, including the professor emeritus of astronomy at Harvard University, a man named Avi Loeb, who has published over 1,000 peer-reviewed papers on aspects of astronomy. This is not like someone who just walked off the street and said, oh my God, the aliens are coming. And he is quite convinced that this object is exhibiting things that only a self-referential intelligent object could. That doesn't mean there's inhabitants in it, but it does mean, according to him and many other people, that there's something going on here that has something that we may be surprised about. I don't know where this is going, but this, like so many other things, is stretching our minds, and what we once thought we knew, we don't. It's happening as we rewrite ancient history, going back a few decades even, certainly more than that. We can go back to people like Manly P. Hall and people who are revisioning, the history of humanity, but back certainly to the, late 80s, early 90s, and people like Robert Bivol and Graham Hancock and Robert Schoch and John Anthony West, and a lot of people who have recreated our timelines, because there's things on this planet that just don't make sense if we think that we are what we are being told we are. And so all of this is all playing, and it's my contention that the crazy shit show going on out there, and I want to be really clear, in no way am I minimizing any of the horrors, any of the suffering, any of the tactics that are being used to keep humans fighting against humans, as if we can be so distracted in our division between me and you, or him and her, or whatever, so that we basically become sheep in the larger game, whatever that game is. I'm not minimizing that at all. But what I am saying is that that cannot and will not sustain. And how it goes down, I don't know. When it goes down, I don't know. But I do believe that the astrology of these triangulated outer planets will be a potential for massive change. And I think it's really important to understand that for the first time in our history, we have the ability to change everything on a dime. That's how fast things can change. It used to be that it would take a lifetime or two for someone in England to know that a great composer lived in Germany, a few hundred miles away. Now, when something happens, in Beijing, we know about it within a few minutes. And so this idea of how fast things can change is something that's brand new. And it changes astrology because these slower moving transits often built up for years, and then it took years for the effects for them to follow through. And on top of that, if you were living through one of these dynamic transits, these dynamic changes, you might be hanging out on the street corner with those people in your neighborhood, but you'd have no idea that there were people hanging out discussing the same things on street corners in every nation and every big city around the world, and you would feel like it's just you're in this little pocket of isolation. And now with the internet, which is, I don't want to glorify the positive sides of the internet, but one of the positive sides is that this ability to create instant community regardless of time and space. And so what that does, combined with the technologies of video cameras in everyone's pocket, is that when there's a great transition, everyone can take photos and videos of what's happening. And so it's much harder to suppress that. And then 3 weeks later or a year later or 20 years later, when that cycle is reactivated, because astrologically cycles are activated, reactivated, re-stimulated again and again, they used to all feel like isolated events. But now something happens and all of a sudden all the video from 3 months ago that's around the same issue comes back up and we're able to connect dots. I call these global feedback loops, kind of like the Grateful Dead invented the idea of auditory feedback loops to create a different kind of sound. We are living in a world where we have created technologies to create these self-referential feedback loops that are pushing people more and more to extremities. And these extremities cannot and will not sustain. So that's kind of the front end of what I had to say. I want to look at the astrology of some of this in a moment. But before I do, comments, feedback, questions from here or from online? Are you all asleep? Oh, there's a whole lot of stuff going on the chat online. Does anyone have any thoughts? Yeah, please. And I'll repeat what you say, but try to keep it short enough that I can repeat it for people online.
Sure. I caught it today in the news that OpenAI released a social media platform. It was launched today, wherein anyone can create video of anything, realistically. So the example they created was Nixon announcing that they would have.
So the comment from the audience is that a new version, a platform for OpenAI, basically allows creation of video. You can throw words at it and it'll make anything look real. Just a comment on AI in general is that it's really exciting as to what it may do and can do, and it's really overwhelmingly catastrophic of what it can and will do when it comes to resources, water and power in particular. And it's certainly a complex issue because it's so tantalizing, kind of like getting on a jet, thinking that throwing out recycling your plastic is doing a good job, and I say that as someone who's done a bit of jet travel. It's complicated living in this day and age, but it's something that we do need to keep in mind. I should also say that the first ChatGPT that was made public, the first AI that was made public in March of 2023, the day that Pluto left Capricorn and entered Aquarius. And Aquarius is the sign of the future. It's the sign of community. It's arguably the most intelligent sign. And for those of you who are Aquarians or Aquarius moons or risings, don't get yourself full of stuff. But there's something that is hyper intelligent about the conceptual framework of the energy of the zodiac sign Aquarius. And it was on that day that ChatGPT went not the company went public, but the platform was made publicly available. Was there another comment over here?
Atlas is supposedly spewing out random elements that it shouldn't.
Yeah, Atlas is. It's been said from the audience that Atlas is spewing out random elements. It has a higher nickel content. It has alloys that it shouldn't. It has a reflective surface that's giving off more energy than it's taking in. There's so many things about it that are just anomalous. And what they ultimately mean at this point in time, I don't know. But I certainly have been, staying in touch. I think Gail posted in the chat, which will be available later on, a couple of links of people who are doing work in that area. All right, I do want to, since this is astrology night, I wanted to bring up a chart. And okay, online, do you see that? I can't see online and this at the same time. This is a chart for October 1st. to Eris and Chiron, and there's a lot of other things I don't want to talk about right now. What I want to focus on in particular. Say that again.
About 1 minute.
It fell through. That what we're looking at here is all the planets, and it looks a bit noisy, but the red lines are hard aspects where there's conflict or tension, and in particular, the slower moving planet Jupiter is 90 degrees or squaring to Eris and Chiron, with Mercury up here in Libra and Pluto in the mix. Now, I talk about this extensively in the October forecast. What I want to do here in the theme of what I talked about so far this evening is I want to eliminate everything except those planets. And here we have a chart that is showing Pluto at 1 degree of Aquarius. And the other thing that's important in October is that all the outer planets, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Chiron, which is between the orbits of Saturn and Uranus, and Eris, which is outside the orbit of Pluto, they're all moving retrograde. They all look like they're moving backwards. And it's kind of like standing in the seashore, and you know the tide's coming in, but you can feel the rip of the back, of the back tide of the undertow that is pulling this way. And right now, all the faster moving planets, the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, are all moving forward, giving us a feeling like new and too many events and things are happening. And meanwhile, the outer planets are creating this drag that will not be felt until they one by one turn direct. Pluto turns direct next week. And then over the next months, all the outer planets will turn direct one by one until by next February, March, everything will be moving forward and things are going to happen. If you think things are crazy and fast moving now, hold on to your hat. Now, Pluto here at 1 degree of Aquarius and 24 minutes, about 1.5 degrees, is moving retrograde. We have Uranus at about 1.25 degree of Gemini moving retrograde, and that thick blue line between the two of them is basically they're 120 degrees apart. That's that 2 points on a triangle, on an equilateral triangle, and 1 degree 12 minutes to 1 degree 24 minutes. That's 12 minutes of arc away from being exact. 12 minutes, if you think of a clock, 12 minutes is 1/5 of an hour. Yeah, 12 times 5 is 60. So that's 1/12 of a degree from being exact. But over the days ahead, that will begin to widen until it becomes, the planets turn direct and it becomes exact next July. We'll watch this in animation in just a moment. But I want you to get this graphically because it's so unusual. Meanwhile, Saturn, that's the orange one at 27.75 degrees of Pisces, 27 degrees Pisces in 42 minutes, also retrograde, was in Aries, but it now retrograded back into Pisces, creating another drag of what was going on the last 2.5 years when Saturn was in Pisces. We got a flavor of something new, and then Saturn's now back in Pisces. Meanwhile, we have Neptune, which is a 165-year cycle, spends about 14 years in each sign. Neptune was in Pisces for 14 years. It touched into Aries over the summer, and now it is retrograding. And by the end of the month, it will also be back in Pisces, meaning by the end of the month, that Saturn and Neptune almost conjunction, which is now getting a little wider until they move direct, and it will be exact next February 20th. But what that means is both Saturn and Neptune, which have moved into Aries, are now either back in Pisces or ready to be back in Pisces. And we're going to feel like, oh my God, haven't we already been through this? I mean, it's like a remedial forced study. It's like all your friends get to go ahead to the next grade, and you're somehow left having to take the same damn course again, except it's all of us that have to take this course again. And then Uranus in Gemini. Now, what I want to do is I want to bring this same thing up. Whoops. No, don't do that. I don't know what I just did, but bear with me here a second. Okay. All right. So I want to move this back to March 1st of 23. Whoop, it didn't like the way I typed that in. Let's try this again. March space 1, 23. Try that. There we go. All right. So this is just a little bit over 2 years ago, right? We can see Pluto at the last degree of Capricorn. Yeah, but we didn't have sound. I think we have sound again. You guys, can you hear now? The microphone is not dead. We're just having. Okay. Bingo. Thanks, Kay. All right. So here we are now in. Let's go back for the third time. This is like a real retrograde. Where we here have the Saturn and Pluto at 29 degrees of Aquarius and Capricorn. We go ahead a month, we can see that they're both in the next signs of Aquarius and Pisces. Now remember, Saturn's moving pretty quickly compared to Pluto. So this is April of 2023. And as we move forward, we'll see the half of the trines, the sextiles, the 60-degree angle begin to come into focus, along with the 120-degree angle. But here it's still almost 10 degrees away from being exact, 0 degrees. And this is 20 degrees of the sign. So it has 10 more degrees to go, and it's moving faster than Pluto. But watch as we move this forward, those lines will thicken, those angles will get closer. And then they'll retrograde, they go away again. Here we are now a year ago, June, July, August of 2024. And we can see that Pluto is still at the 0 degrees of Aquarius, and Neptune almost went into Aries, but just before it did, it started turning retrograde. And we move this forward, and now they're all retrograde. They all look like they're moving backwards. Pluto now is direct again. This is January of this year. And now watch what happens as we move this forward. All of a sudden, Saturn and Neptune move right there. Neptune, moving slower, moves into Aries in the end of March, very end of March of 2025. And then behind it, Saturn catches up pretty quickly. So now by June, Saturn and Neptune are both in Aries. Uranus at the end of Taurus. But look at that triangle beginning to get thicker and thicker as these aspects get tighter and tighter, so that now Saturn and Neptune are both in 1 degree of Aries, just like less than a quarter of a degree from being exact. But by September 1st, Saturn turns retrograde. Pluto's already retrograde. Neptune will turn retrograde by the end of October. And you can see all of these lines get thinner and thinner and thinner. And then Neptune turns direct. We're now in February of 2026. Neptune is back in Aries. And by February 20th, actually, and I'm not going to skip past this to March 1st, but you can see how faster moving Saturn has overtaken Neptune. And I also missed the fact that here in July into August of this year, 2025, Uranus moved from Taurus into Gemini, making this trine by sign, air sign Aquarius, air sign Gemini, with the Saturn-Neptune halfway in between it, making this first round of what I called a moment in time that seemed like it was a moment in time, but it's really a moment in time that's getting pulled into the future by this major event that we'll see in a moment in July, as all of this we're being pulled into the future by what quantum physicists might call a great attractor that's creating retrocausality. The future is basically pulling the past or the now into the future. So we can see here, if we move this now to September 1st, Saturn has retrograded back into Pisces. By October 1st, there's November 1st. Now Neptune and Saturn are both back in Pisces, and this is like that. I always think of the Yogi Berra line, "Deja vu all over again," and yet the Uranus and Pluto are still quite close together. And then Uranus backs into Taurus. And so by the end of this year, beginning of next year, it's going to feel like, oh my God, we're back. There's no way out of this. But then Neptune moves forward by the beginning of February into Aries. Then Saturn will actually line up with Neptune exactly on February 20th at 0 degrees of Aries. And then as Uranus begins to move forward, watch what happens to the thickness of this line. And the exact real date, what I want to do here for a moment is I want to add, back in Jupiter and the moon, and you'll see why here in just a moment. Because if we go to, we can do this just a day at a time and back this up to July 19th. That's what I'm looking at. And we could actually back this up even a few hours more. And there's not an astrologer alive who's ever seen a chart like this. And I don't know who is going to be born with this chart, but people will. And what we're seeing is Pluto at 4 degrees of Aquarius, Neptune at 4 degrees of Aries. That's an exact degree sextile. Uranus at 4 degrees of Gemini, trining Pluto and sextiling Uranus. Jupiter having moved through Cancer and it at 4 degrees of Leo, exactly opposite Pluto, exactly trine Neptune, and exactly sextile Uranus, and the moon whizzing through this at the speed of Comet 3I Atlas, just kind of fast compared to all these other things for a few hours, will be making the 5th point on a 6-pointed star. And so this is the event in the future that has the potential, the hope, the possibility of what lays around the bend, that is around the bend. But it's still going to take a few years for it to unfold because this the Uranus-Pluto trine, which is the slowest moving piece of this whole process, that trine will move in and out of shape. Let me get rid of the moon and Jupiter here. Oh, it's so powerful to just be able to get rid of Jupiter. Displayed points and edit. But as we move through this, and you'll watch this kind of go away, and not a few hours at a time, let's go back a month at a time. And so here we are in August of next year, 2026, and you can see the planets are now retrograding, and it's almost like it goes away and it comes back, and it goes away and it comes back. And this is going to be with us really all the way through 2028 and 2029. And so what this means for us is that we are in a state where things are still hyper fluid, even though we look out at the events out there, and it seems like things are unchangeable. Things, by the time we get toward the end of next summer, are going to be a hell of a lot less changeable than they are now. What that means is, the famous wedding words, speak now or forever hold your peace. Well, that's what's happening right now. He who is quiet is voting for the status quo from one end of the spectrum all the way to the other. And of course, whatever it is we do or don't do on any one particular issue, and there's so many issues out there that you can fall on one side of or another. But the thing is that if you don't do what you can now within the realms of not being unsafe, because obviously there are people who are putting themselves in harm's way in order to make a statement. And some of us may do that also, but that has to be a personal decision. On the other hand, there's something that anyone and that everyone can do, and that's up to each of us to figure that out. Yes, comment, question?
Comment.
I think that the child that's going to be born on July 19th is going to be conceived right around now. I think it's 9 or 10 months.
Yeah. The comment was that this is about 9 months out from now, and so that a child conceived at this point in time may be born around now. Let's put this back to a here and now. So that's my story for tonight. My story for tonight is we ain't ever been here before, and although astrologers are supposed to know what's happening around the bend, the best we can do right now is simply say, this is the bend. And the bend is a big one. And it's one that we've never been at before, not only astrologically, but also technologically. And one does not exist independent of the other. It's very important. I did a talk at the 25th anniversary symposium for Kepler College in Niagara Falls last month. And I talked about astrologer as agent of change. And in it, I mentioned that Marshall McLuhan, who is considered to be a media guru of the 1960s, 70s, an academic historian. If you ever heard the term, the medium is the message, well, that was not the name of his book. It was The Medium is the Massage, but it was meant as a James Joycean-like pun, because McLuhan said, it's not what we watch on TV, it's not what we do on the internet, it's that we're watching TV, or that we don't have, books, or that we do, that the way in which we take in information alters our sensory organs and ratios. And this is very important because McLuhan claimed that historically artists sat in the ivory towers reflecting what happens or what was happening in the world, that they were patronized to basically remove and reflect and then to write about what was happening. And McLuhan said, but things are moving so fast these days, and this was in the late 60s that he wrote this, that the artist has had to move from the ivory tower to the control tower. And I would suggest that we are all artists, that we are all at a point where it's not valuable anymore to just sit back and watch, that we're all participants, kind of like Burning Man. There are no observers. This is quantum physics 101, and that is that everyone who perceives anything impacts what we perceive. And so that's my little story for tonight. I want to end by thanking Soul Food and the baristas. You guys are great. Thank you. And we'll take about a 15-minute break. For those of you online, we'll be back in about 15 minutes or so. We'll take a quick look at a couple of charts of those of you here. If you never have had your chart done here, I don't have forms tonight with me, but just take a little slip of paper and put your name, your email address, your birth date, place, and time, and I will put a hat on this chair right in front of the stage, and I'll pick a couple of charts and we'll look at them real time for those of you who want to see how this works with someone real, at the other end of it rather than amorphous cultural events out there. I also want to just remind all of you that by being here, in some ways, the community that we create is really important, and keeping places like Soul Food alive and well basically involves you voting. And I don't mean at the polls. I mean, instead of buying something online, taking the easy way out and buying it from Amazon or some big box store or wherever, take a look around in what's here and get a birthday present for someone, or do something that involves spending your money in a way that matters and keeps this place going for community events like this and other things. Did I miss anything?
Are you going to be here in November and December?
I will be here in November. I will not be here in December and January. I will be in India. Goodbye. Or on my way to or on my way back from India. And I'll be back the first Friday of February, but I'll make sure that goes online. If you're not on my mailing list, let me unshare my screen here. I probably should have done this sooner. Sorry, guys. Oh, it's already stop screen. Does that do it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, if for those of you who are not on my email list, you can either fill out a slip of paper and give it to me here. That'll get you on the email list. I won't send you a ton of marketing crap, maybe occasional something, but I'll send you notices of like events like this or things that other events that I may be doing. But you can also go to my website, which is ricklevineastrologer.com, and sign up there. And have I missed anything? Questions? Answers? How about answers? No? Did you hear about the new restaurant on Mars? Good food, no atmosphere. And with that, we'll take a 15-minute break and we'll see you all on the far end of this. And thank you all online for your patience. Yeah, Sherry has to go to bed. By the way, the replay of this will be online. It'll be on YouTube. So you'll be able to watch it. And if you can't stick around now and want to see the charts, you'll be able to do that also from home. And thank you all. Okay, we are back, and I am going to, let's see. Oh, thanks, Gail, and or Craig, or whoever did that. And I have a couple of charts to enter, and again, I want to apologize for the internet kind of craziness, and I appreciate you guys hanging around. And is there anything, Gail, is there, oh, there's Sparkles. Nicholas is here. Hey, Nicholas. Sorry you couldn't make it here tonight. Is there anything that I need to do aside from jumping in and drawing a couple of charts, which I'm going to do right now? I got one. Oh, two came out together. Well, three came out. All right, we'll breeze through these. God, I thought, Tiffany, where are you? I thought you were really old. I thought it said 1781, and I thought, wow, that's almost a Pluto return. All right, let's run through a couple of charts. These are, just remember that when we do these, it may feel like all the attention is on you for a few moments. I only ask that you interact with me. If it's easier to move closer for the few minutes, that would be easier. If you don't want to, that's okay. Obviously, in this kind of situation, there are things that you may or may not want to disclose, and that's totally understandable. Let me share my screen and get your data entered. Share screen, and we're going to share the entire screen and allow. And we're going to now bring up Solar Fire, which is the software that I use, and I'm going to enter in Tiffany, and I put an SF after it, so I know it was from Soul Food. And we have another Aries, 3/23/81. And whoop, that didn't work right. Let's try that again. 3/23/81 at 3:43 a.m. in Greencastle, Indiana. Tiffany, do you know your chart at all? What's your relationship to astrology?
Pretty
A little bit? Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring back all the other planets, because I had eliminated them for our little show and tell before. And we're going to do that. Whoops, wrong one. Displayed points and I think that'll work just fine. No, too many points. Let's get rid of aspected points and edit, and we do not need. Hold on 1 second, we'll be right there. First one takes the longest to set up because displayed points, that's what we want. And we want edit, and we want to get rid of that. Okay, so, but I also want to change the colored lines in the middle and bring in some of my other, there we go. Okay, so when I look at a chart, something usually jumps out at me, and what jumps out at me when I look at your chart, the first thing that jumps out at me is that you are an early Aries. Aries, the first moment of spring, was a couple of days before you were born. That varies each year slightly. But so you were born with the sun at 2 degrees of Aries, and Mars, which is the key planet of Aries, is lined up with the sun. So this Mars-Sun conjunction or alignment in Aries, I think, is immediately significant because every planet has a home sign or two, and Mars is at home in Aries. But also every planet has a place that it likes being when it's not at home. And this is called its exaltation. And the sun is exalted in Aries. So you have two things right together that are really, really cool in where they are. However, they are also very close to Venus in Pisces. And I say however, which is actually a third point that makes it even cooler because Venus is exalted in Pisces. So this alignment between Venus in Pisces, which is gentle and loving and compassionate and kind of a sweet place for Venus to be, the Sun and Mars, which is very energetic and very, in a way, even forceful in Aries. But here's the thing, they are opposite a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. And Jupiter and Saturn are like, they're not outer planets, they're not out past Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, but they're the two biggest and slowest moving planets that the ancients knew about. And so they are considered to be our social regulators, where Jupiter says more and Saturn says less. Jupiter says grow, Saturn says contract. Jupiter says, that's a great idea. Saturn says, work your ass off now to get to that idea. And so they're, in a way, they're like cosmic opposites. And they align every 20 years in the even numbered decades, 1900, 1920, 1940, 1960, 1980, in your case, early 81, and 2000, 2020, 2040, and so on. But to me, that's like a really a strong and powerful beginning of a chart, which has a built-in paradox. There's another word I'm looking for beyond paradox. It's like there's something that is paradoxical, because in a way it's the dilemma between Aries and Taurus. Between Aries and Libra, inside, outside, me, you. This is very much a chart about relationship, whether they're love relationship, sibling relationship, work relationships, client relationship. There's something about the give and take of not enough, too much, yes, I should, no, I shouldn't have, yes, I will, no, I won't. You know, this kind of back and forthness that I think is really intriguing, because all of those green lines in the midst of that red line opposition are, to me, points of irritation. In other words, there's a part of your chart that has some major good DNA, good structure at the beginning of it, and yet sometimes the feelings don't fit in. Scorpio moon is Mars's other favorite sign, and your moon in Scorpio is passionate, intense, volatile even. But I think that in your chart, also Mercury in Pisces, Mercury is how we communicate, and Mercury in Pisces, even though there are three planets that like where they are, meaning the Venus, Sun, and Mars, Mercury in Pisces has a harder time because Mercury wants to be analytical and wants to be exacting and wants information, and Pisces basically just wants to, watch cartoons, smoke dope, or listen to music, or or sing and dance, or write poetry. It's the mystic, and I think that part of you that has that mystical approach in life, in some ways probably bugs the part of you that has the more Saturnian Capricorn rising, that knows what you need to do and needs to, wants to do it right and get ahead. And then there's the part of you that's a bit crazy. And that would be the Uranus, trining the Venus, which is the love of things. I mean, there's other things that suggest this also, but there's a love of things that are not the status quo, not the norm, that are outside of the box, that kind of, I think, probably on a good day bring you experiences that are really cool, and on a bad day that Saturn kicks in and said, I probably shouldn't have done that. So probably a little bit of both. Did you have something you were going to say?
There's something blocking the screen from actually showing.
Well, that's not good.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that I waited so long to respond to that. Where's something else? There we go. All right. So now that we have reality back in front of us, Craig, you're asleep at the wheel.
I was looking at this screen. This is perfect.
Oh, it is. Well, then eat your hearts out, everyone. No. But thank you for that. Feedback, thoughts, comments?
Yeah, I always see it as kind of like a push and pull, that I'm trying to find that balance and veer back and forth, and it's constant.
Yeah, no, and it's really interesting because the balance part, I think in some ways, because it's Jupiter and Saturn are more social pressures, that if you didn't have those social pressures, you'd have no problem pushing boundaries in any which way you wanted to. But, but there's a part that has to be self-constrained in some way because of consequences. Does that make sense a little bit?
I learned early that consequences can be immediate. So it's like you learn once and then you're like, okay, the world taught me that lesson. Gotcha.
So when I look at your chart and see what's going on now, I am intrigued by the fact that we spent the first part of this evening talking about Neptune and Saturn moving from Pisces into Aries. And so they've already your Venus is at 28, almost 29 degrees of Pisces, and your Sun is at 2 degrees of Aries. So both Neptune and Saturn have gone over your Venus, kind of softening it, widening it, smushing it out, confusing it, spiritualizing it, while Saturn has come in and saying, no, here's the hard lessons, get real, get it together. And that they're both retrograding from Aries now back still. They're not done with that Venus, but over the next months through March, April, both Saturn and Neptune will align with your Sun and Mars and then go opposite the Jupiter and Saturn. And so I think this is a pretty significant time in your life. And there's probably been some really exciting stuff too, because of the trine to Uranus, that fat blue line from the Venus at 29 degrees, 28 plus of Pisces. And so as Saturn and Neptune have been going over that point, they've been harmonizing with your Uranus, which has been encouraging you perhaps on some levels to be attracted to or do things in a way that may have been different than other, previous. And I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like everything's kind of changing now. Like I'm that caterpillar, I'm right in the middle of the goop. So.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I've got because of the degree of my moon, I've got Pluto squaring it. So it's going back and forth, like massaging that knot.
We were going to get there next, and that Pluto at 1-2 degrees of Aquarius, which has gone over that point, just barely touched it, retrograding, and it's got another run to do as it goes direct again, is not massage. Unless your therapist is a sadist. No, it doesn't have to be bad, but there's deep things that are being pushed and forced into your awareness that are feeding these other changes that are also going on at the same time. In other words, it's the combination of the Pluto, Uranus, and Saturn and Neptune, that whole triangle that is impacting your chart in lots of different directions right now. And it really will take another year or two, for things to really unfold in a way enough that you know what the new direction is. And I would suggest that with something like this, I would never encourage someone I would never encourage someone with a Capricorn rising not to make plans.
It's hard.
Except for you now. Because whatever plans you make now are going to be modified and changed dramatically enough. It's like it's like the old clipper ships. I've used this analogy before.
Move the little things.
It's like the old clipper ships that had to sail around the tip of Africa or South America, and you couldn't take your sighting on where you were going until you were around the bend. Right now, everything in your life is about getting around the bend. Once you're around the bend, and it could take a couple, 2 or 3 years to really feel like you're around this bend, then you'll be clear and you'll be able to take a sighting on where you're going. Whatever long-term plans you make now probably will be evaluated, reevaluated, reconsidered, and altered several times along the way. Again, not that you shouldn't do that, but the more immediate concern is getting around the bend.
Yeah, I know I'm in a period of flux right now, so I have to accept that it's gonna be fluxy.
Yeah, fluxy, as long as it's not all fluxed up. All right, thank you for sharing your chart. All right, next we have, is it Renee? Here I am. Get your butt up here, wherever you are. There you are. How do you say, is it Renee? Rini.
Mhm.
Well, there you go. Well, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And let's get your data in. And this is 11/22/43 and 12/57/23. Okay, let's do that 12/58 just to mess with your whatever Virgo energy you might have. And this is, oh, it doesn't say where you were born. Where were you born?
Long Beach, California.
I lived there. I lived on 3rd, just in Miramar, just up the south end of Long Beach. Long Beach, California. We good? And do you know?
November 11th.
And do you know November what?
It's November the 22nd.
Oh, okay, I got it. And do you know your chart a little bit, or?
Yeah, actually, Rick, I've been doing this since I was like 23, but I am just a student,
We're all just students.
you know, so
Yep.
I started out going to astrology meetings when Dane Rudyard was in Portland, going, you know, so I
Well, lucky
knew,
you for having met Dane Rudyard.
yes,
Yeah.
well, I
Yeah.
got to meet the old guard.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's frightening to think that I'm the old guard now, but that's neither here nor
well,
there.
me too.
There you go.
But I did it off and on. 'cause
Yeah,
I
okay.
had to raise
So
them.
when I look at your chart, again, sticking with the, first shot, whatever, stands out, I see interesting here. Again, we have an Aries Libra opposition, and the moon lined up with Neptune, Venus wide, but the moon, Neptune, and Venus in Libra, opposite Eris. And most modern astrologers are using Eris. It was like when Pluto was discovered, or any other planet, and Eris is Mars's sister, sometimes referred to as the goddess of discord or sower of chaos. But Eris is really about radical inclusion and exclusion. Eris likes to stir things up to see what doesn't fit in so that they can then be brought into the pack. And what's interesting is that your kind of spiritual, fantasy, fuzzy, artistic side, whatever that might be, is opposite Eris, which is very powerful in your chart because it's part of a grand fire trine. And what I find interesting is that although Mercury in fiery Sagittarius is, and you can see, I was talked earlier this evening about the triangle. Here we have a grand triangle or grand trine with Mercury in fiery Sagittarius, Eris in fiery Aries, and Pluto in fiery Leo. And this basically, I think, is very significant because Mercury and the Sun are way up at the top of the chart and suggesting that communication in some way is part of your life, your career, what you do or have done. I assume you're retired or retiring, but the Sun hangs back at not quite in Sagittarius, and that watery emotional piece, I think, has a very important role to play, especially since Mercury opposite Uranus kind of says rebellious thinking, kind of non-conventional. There's this whole piece of this Gemini of the airy kind of intellectual words, books. I mean, this is somehow an important piece, and yet the watery Scorpio Sun is the only water in your chart, and so in a way, I think it really helps, kind of keep you in that more emotional realm, even with an Aquarius rising. There's a lot of your chart that is kind of, if I say masculine, I don't mean boy girl. I mean yang. It's fire air. It's upward. It's ascending energy. And so, how do we do? Who are you?
Yes, that's right. All of that's right.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye. No. What kind of work did you do when you were working?
I did a lot of office work.
Yeah.
And I got tired of sitting around at desks, so then I started doing, like material handlers, type of work.
And I know the Saturn-Mars conjunction is very much about organization and putting physical energy around systems and making things work. And yet I would imagine also that Saturn-Mars could be at times problematic because Mars is like the gas pedal and Saturn is the brake. And so it can make sometimes for difficulty in knowing when to go ahead, when not to, or kind of that hot, cold, yes, no, do it, don't do it.
I think with my chart, I could have done more with it, and I had aspirations of doing important things, but I would never allow myself to do that. You know what I mean? I sort of sabotage myself.
Yeah, we're humans. We do that. What about the artistic kind of,
Yes, I was very artistic.
Yeah, and I'm getting that from the Moon, Neptune, and Venus all in Libra, harmonizing with the Gemini stuff. I mean, there's a lot of, I don't know you. I know nothing about you, but the air grand trine to the Aquarius rising, I would imagine that you're smarter than the average bear. Is that a Yogi Bear thing? Yeah. Are we not? Huh? Yeah.
So just repeat what you're saying to the.
Yeah. No, that's go ahead.
Well, what holds me back to that I learned this from other readings is I have Mercury, an opposition
from Mercury to Uranus.
Yes, and so for a long time until this astrologer read my chart and said, "Hey, the way your mind works is you think you're not very intelligent," because it's sort of I have some learning problems.
So let me interrupt you, only because we don't have a lot of time.
Right.
Rini is saying that the Mercury opposition to Uranus may be kind of a self-limiting thing of like, I'm not as smart as I could be or should be. I would say that that's more that this related more to the Saturn-Mars, the feeling like you have to work harder or study harder or learn more to get to the same place that other people already seem to be at in some way.
Well, what she said to me was, your mind is, sometimes you're just totally in the dark.
Yeah.
And she goes, just remember, just switch a light and you can turn on your mind.
Cool.
And that really helped me. I grew from that.
And Rini is saying that it really helped an astrologer, saying that you had the ability to switch on the light. And with the Uranus Mercury, I would suggest that it's very apparent that when you know something, you know it. And when you don't, it's like when you're hot, and when you're not, you're not. It's like intellectually, it's either on or off.
Yeah.
So,
I have it.
yeah. Okay, we're going to move on just because we're cut for time right now.
All
We
right.
want to get Nathan
Well,
out of here in
anyway,
time.
I thank you very much for all you do. You
Well-
have inspired me
Aw.
by being able to watch on.
Well, thank you for sharing your chart with us.
Yeah.
All right, one more. We're going to do this rather quickly. And this is, Sunaya. Say your name again. Sunaina. We had a short conversation at break. All right, let me get this data in. And this is a March 21st, another Aries, 1982 at 9:20 p.m. And that's in, oh my God, I hate spelling this word. THIRUVANANTHAPURAM. Say it for us. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And that is India. It's not showing.
Does it show? Does another spelling for it? We can try that.
That's, hold on.
Trivandrum is
Yeah. THIR. No, we don't have it.
Do you have Trivandrum? TRI.
TRI. Yeah, probably. TRI.
VAN.
All right, we're still working on it. There we are.
Trivandrum.
TRI. Kerala. There we go. We have Trivala. No.
TRIVAN.
TRIVUVA.
TRIVAN.
Do you see it here?
I'm
TRI.
looking.
No, that's TIR. Okay, we're getting there. There it is.
Yeah.
Kerala. All right, that was painful. All right. From Kerala. Oh, that did it. So, and Sunaina was saying during break that she has studied some, or is learning some Vedic astrology, which the planets are in slightly different signs, but the angles between them stay the same. And what's interesting is I look at your chart is this very close conjunction between the moon and Venus in your chart. Moon, it doesn't matter which system you use. If when you were born, you draw a straight line from the Earth to the moon and keep going a few million miles, well, probably about 60 or 70 million miles, Venus is lined up with the moon. And Venus and the moon are two feminine energies, and that they're aligned is kind of sweet, except they're aligned in a rather cool or emotionally detached sign, at least in Western astrology, in Aquarius. In Vedic astrology, they would be in Capricorn, which is not a whole lot less detached emotionally. So either system kind of has that Venus moon, which is a real blessing. Also, the fact that they are harmonized or trine with Mars in Libra, and you have a whole bunch of planets in Libra, but this would suggest that you have a way to go with it. There's a way to move with that energy that allows you to make it work in your life. And I think that is a blessing. The blue lines in the chart here are all trines, and they're all showing harmonies. And in your chart, you have a fair amount of that. If there is stress In one way, I think it comes from the fact that Neptune was 90 degrees to the sun when you were born, and the sun at 0 degrees of Aries. We've been talking about the Saturn and Neptune going back and forth at 0 degrees of Aries. Well, next February, or between, let's say, the last few months and next March and April, in that window, from a standpoint of any astrology, whether it be Western tropical astrology, which is what I do, or if it was Vedic or Jyotish, which is the Indian Hindu astrology tradition, it doesn't matter, because Saturn and Neptune will both be aligning with your sun, which is kind of a karmic period of time. It's like reality is saying, whatever happens in your life, you get what you deserve. And it's usually not all good or all bad. It usually points out to us where we've been slacking and where we get rewards. And I think that even between now and next spring, it's really important to just kind of keep some focus on where you want your life to go, because I think that those things are being set up now. And by the time you get to next March, April, May, June, you're going to be on the other side of this process. But your chart with that sun at 0 degrees of Aries is kind of like a poster child chart for everything I was talking about earlier this evening, because the focus of that whole triangle that I showed earlier is basically lining up with your sun. The other thing that I want to say here very briefly is, we all know every day when the sun rises because we can see it. But every day, every planet rises. We may not notice it. You were born at Jupiter rise. And Jupiter in the Vedic tradition, in Hindi, is guru. And Jupiter is the teacher that expands our mind. It brings us opportunity. It kind of opens us up. I said earlier, looking at, it wasn't Rini's chart, it was, how quickly I forget, my brain.
Tiffany.
Yeah, Tiffany's chart had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, and I said it was like expand and contract. Well, Jupiter is the expand. And in your chart, you have Jupiter rising, which would suggest, and again, it doesn't matter which system you use, in Vedic astrology, it would be Jupiter or Guru conjunct your Lagni, which is the rising point, the ascendant. And this kind of gives you both the ability and the having to deal with that when you meet people, you seem bigger than you are. You seem more expansive, more open, more. And so people meet you like this, and then they get to know you. And it's not like you're not that, but there's more kind of consideration, contraction, more hard work, more serious, but you don't necessarily, that's not what people see when they meet you at the very beginning, I would imagine from that. But I would say that for you, and also like Rini, you have Mercury in Pisces, which also is a bit of the dreamer. That's the, but the fact that you were born like on the day of the spring equinox and that the Venus and Moon are really close together, those are both sweet energies. One last thing I want to say here is that the sun in your chart is 1/3 of the circle, fire Aries, to the Uranus at 4 degrees of Sagittarius, and which is fire also. And there's a part of you that always will go to what is new and different and exciting, even if someone's saying don't or you shouldn't. There's a part of you when someone says no, you immediately know you need to. And so there's a bit of a rebel there. And so does that make a little bit of sense?
A lot of sense. What about Saturn?
What about Saturn? Well, Saturn in your chart is between Mars and Pluto. This is even though it's in Libra, which is a sign of balance and harmony, there's a lot of intensity and a lot of discipline that kind of really, I think, holds your chart together in some ways. And I would imagine that you're a really hard worker when you decide to do something. There's no stopping you, that you have that even though you can look like everything's sweet and everything's okay, there's a part of you that just keeps showing up until something is done, which is very un-Aries-like, because Aries like to start things and then start something else and then start something else. And I know what I'm talking about since I have 4 planets in Aries. So thank you very much. And thank you all for sticking around. I'm going to officially end the internet broadcast. And thank you, Craig, for standing in and helping tonight. And thank you, Gail. Let me get rid of the screen share here for a moment. Stop the screen share. And we are back here. And I appreciate all you guys for sticking with it and showing up. And this will be up permanently on my YouTube channel. And with that, I'm going to end the broadcast.